Elden Ring has been out for a little over a month now, and it's already being heralded as one of the greatest games ever created. Everyone's talking about it, everyone's playing it, everyone's talking about how this boss is difficult, how this weapon is super cool, how this armor set looks really cool, and everything down to the smallest of things to the biggest of things. And it feels like this game truly is everywhere, unlike anything that I've ever seen before. All I can really think about personally myself is how much I really want to play more Elden Ring. I want to, fight the difficult bosses and see if I can beat them or not. I want to play through all of the content of the game, experience every little small detail of the game that I haven't even seen before yet, experience some of the different playstyles that you can do in the game. There's so much that you can do in this game, it's astounding. I never really played a game like this before where it feels like there are infinite possibilities with what you can do. With just everything that the game gives you right at the very start. It truly feels like that there are infinite possibilities with whatever that you want to do. And specifically in the build department with what you can actually do with your characters. If you want to go full-on melee with big, colossal axes or swords, you can go ahead and do that. Just be an Unga Bunga character for all you care. But if you want to go ahead and spam magic spells, you can go ahead and do that too. There are a variety of different ways that you can play this game, and the possibilities of whatever it is that you want to do truly feel like you could just do whatever you want, and not a lot of games have that free ability of player choice, and I feel like Elden Ring perfectly shows that off at the beginning hours of the game. Exploration has never been this good in an open world setting before, and only FromSoft has been able to take the open world setting and do something with it that's never really been done before, or do it on a scale that is so finely tuned to the experience of the player that rewards player experience and rewards player exploration. And I love it. I love every facet about it, and I feel like more games need to see this. And I feel like game devs are truly seeing that Elden Ring has a lot to offer in comparison to what their games have to, because people have been talking about how Ubisoft's games have kind of been down to shitter and aren't really that good. And I think that's just really a testament to how good Elden Ring is. It's making people realize how bad other people's games are, like Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed series, which was once heralded as one of the greatest franchises ever created, to now just being reduced to a former shell of what it once was, to the point where it's lost a lot of fans like myself. The design of the weapons are super cool. The weapon arts that they have are insanely creative and insanely unique to all the unique legendary weapons that you can use. The armor, the drip in this game is absolutely phenomenal. I was talking about this with a friend of mine the other day, like a few weeks ago actually, and we were talking about how this game has such phenomenal drip with armor sets like this one, and this one, and this one, and then one of the best armor sets just simply off of the looks, and it's straight up because of the fact that it's Guts' armor from Berserk, and it's just the Berserker armor, and Elden Ring truly kind of feels like a love letter to the manga series of Berserk and the creator of that series as well, that it's actually kind of hilarious. Like, Guts' sword is literally in the game. Guts' armor is literally in the game. There are so many references to that series, that manga series, that it truly feels like it's just a huge fan love letter to the creator and his series that, you can't help but just appreciate, and you kind of notice it whenever you do see it, especially if you're a huge Berserk fan like many people who are playing this game. No boss ever feels that they're too difficult to beat, to the point where they feel like it's impossible or they have something that's just completely unfair. The level design is phenomenal. I've never played a game that has such phenomenal level design. I want to mention something about From Software's games that some people may or may not really talk about or really think about, but From Software has incredible art design, and the artists on their team are incredibly talented and deserve all the praise that they can get. And it kind of brings up a topic of conversation about comparing From Software's games and how they're beautiful in the context of how great their art design is, where if you compare it to some game like something from Sony's library of games like Spider-Man or Horizon Forbidden West and many of their other multitude of different games. God of War is also another great example. Sony's first-party games are beautiful games in terms of their graphics. They also have unique art designs that belong to them as well, and the artists for those games definitely deserve praise as well. But those games are always being praised because they're graphically very pretty looking games, and they truly are very pretty in terms of their graphics. and their artists definitely deserve a lot of praise for that. But From Software games are never really known for being huge on being graphically interesting to look at. They're always known for being really good at making two different areas of the entirety of their map and all of their games look completely different from each other while still keeping in the exact same art style and the tone that the game is going for. Looking at games like Bloodborne, to any of the Dark Souls games, to Sekiro, to now Elden Ring, they all have different unique tones of art style, but the art is done so meticulously down to the minus the little details that comparing the visuals of two different games like Elden Ring and something like Spider-Man Horizon Forbidden West just isn't really a good topic to talk about, because they're both good looking games for entirely two different reasons. And I wanted to mention that really quick because that was something that a couple of friends of mine and myself were talking about right around the time when the game was first released, and like the first couple of weeks of the game. And I was really interested in talking about it because that was one of the very first few things that I noticed when I was playing the game in the first early few hours, was that the game is very pretty because the art design is done so fantastically well. It's not the most pretty looking game in terms of its graphics, but just looking at the art style alone tells you that this is a phenomenal looking game, because it doesn't need to be high in graphics. It just needs to have a tone and have a style and stick to that style through and through and just keep going with that. Back to the bosses and like the whole difficulty thing, one thing that I really want to say here and now is I think the reason why Elden Ring truly is one of the greatest games of all time is that it doesn't bullshit you. I'm so sick and tired of modern games, modern single player games especially, bullshitting with players by giving us difficulty scaling and difficulty choices. Like having difficulty choices like easy, normal, hard mode, very hard mode, stuff like that. I'm kind of sick and tired of those difficulty options in modern single-player video games, because a lot of them are just arbitrary, as they truly don't change anything about enemy engagement and enemy difficulty in the games that they're featured in. An example where I feel like it actually does that very well is actually the Kingdom Hearts series, where you can play a game on easy mode and play a game on the hardest difficulty, which in Kingdom Hearts 2 FM, it's critical mode. You can play the game on those two entirely different modes, and the game will play vastly different. And that's where I feel like the difficulty setting was actually done very well in that game. But in games like, say, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, that game has a difficulty setting option that you can choose in the game where you can make it super easy or super difficult. But it's around kind of the same, right? The enemies don't really feel that much more aggressive. The enemies are a little bit more harder, but not in the sense that they are more aggressive, just that they take more damage and they deal out more damage. And that's not fun to play. That's not fun for the player to engage in combat with. It just ends up leading to a very monotonous, annoying experience. And as someone who delved a lot of hours into Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and I have my own video talking about it, I fucking hated it. Fucking playing that game was terrible, and it's because the difficulty in the game was just not scaled properly. Whereas I play something like Elden Ring, and the game doesn't fucking bullshit me, because what it does is that it takes me, the player, and it throws me into the world and just says, good fucking luck. Go find what you want to find, go where you want to go, and just good fucking luck. If you think you can beat that boss, go ahead and try to see if you want to try your luck and beat that boss. If you can't handle it, or if you're not high enough level or don't do enough damage, come back some other time. Go and do some other activities, and then come back a couple odd hours later and try at it again. And it's player choice, in that you can make the game as easy or as difficult as possible. And it's the reason why a lot of the articles that talk about how the game needs a fucking easy mode are retarded. For a lack of a better word to use, it's retarded, because you can make the game as easy or as difficult as you want. I've seen playthroughs where there are people who are refusing to use magic or summons, because in the game you can use ash summons where they spawn little like allies for you to be able to use in combat, only in specific areas of the game, by the way, and they get the aggro from whatever enemy that you're fighting. And at some points they can also definitely kill bosses for you or kill enemies for you. But there are playthroughs where people are straight up refusing to use them because they feel that it makes the game easier.
I'm gonna get cooked because I gotta remember how to fight you. Yep, okay, all right. Wait, who the fuck is that? Was there, am I fighting 2 bosses? Oh, what's good with it? Oh! All right, now we got to deal with somebody named Crucible Knight. All right, I forgot how slow that animation was. All right, I'm dead. The move is definitely gonna be kill this fucking lion first and then deal with Crucible Knight. Use your summons. No, this is hard mode. I have an axe and confidence, bro. That's all I need.
And in some ways, it does end up making the game easier. But it's all up to player choice of whether or not you want to use them. If you want to use them and make the experience easier for yourself, you have that choice. Another choice that you also have is leveling up. You can level up in this game, which was something that you couldn't do in From Software's previous video game, which was Sekiro. Sekiro didn't have that. There was no typical leveling up that you would see in most normal games. You just had to go at a boss, and if you couldn't beat it, then you just had to keep going at the boss until you finally beat it. There were a couple other things that you can do to try to make the experience much more easier, but you pretty much just only had you yourself and your skills at the game in order to beat the boss. Elden Ring doesn't have that. If you want to, you can go and kill a dragon at like a later game area, and that gives you like potentially upwards to like 70,000 experience points, and you can get like all the way to like level like 50 something, and you can steamroll all of the early game like after towards where you get to Leoria or whatever it's called, whatever the second area of the map is called, past Limgrave pretty much. You can steamroll all of that, right? You're having a hard time against Margit or Godric. Well, go kill the dragon, get easy experience because that dragon is super easy to kill. Go find this super overpowered weapon that you can get in the very early hours of the game. Find some smithing stones, upgrade your weapons, and then just go take on those bosses that you're having such a hard time with, and then you're able to steamroll through them. It's player experience that defines your experience in the game. If you're having a hard time, don't feel ashamed to ask for help or go ask on like forums or look up certain YouTube videos for you to get some help on how to make your experience much more enjoyable to your own choices and to your own experience, and just play the game how you want. You can play the game however way you want, right? Like right now I have a build that's solely focused on having high arcane with the Rivers of Blood, and I steamroll past through tons of bosses. One of the hardest bosses in the game, which is Melania, who's like in one of the final endgame areas. It didn't take me any less than like 30 minutes to beat this boss, and it's because I had the Rivers of Blood, had like 80 arcane, destroyed her with bleed damage basically by itself. And when I kept on dying and I couldn't do it myself, I made it even more easier on myself, and I used one of the most overpowered Ash summons in the game, which was the Mimic tier. And the one run that I actually decided to use it, I beat it first try. And all I did was just use one thing that I wasn't using before to make my experience even easier. You have the choices all at hand, but a lot of people who are making these articles saying that Elden Ring needs an easy mode, Sekiro needs an easy mode, Dark Souls is too difficult and it's alienating players, and all this stupid dumb shit that they're talking about, right? It doesn't make sense because your player choice and player experiences are what define what happens in your game. You have full control of what you yourself can do in order to make the game as easy or as difficult as you want. You want to make it the most difficult thing as possible? Then start the game off naked and play at level fucking 1, right? If you want to do that, you can go ahead and do that. People have already been doing it. If you want to make it as easy as fucking possible, you have your choices. And all you need to do is just do a tiny little minuscule of research in order to be able to fucking do it, and you're fine, right? Just do whatever it is that you want to do. It's just bothered me so much seeing like all these articles and people talking about like, oh, Elden Ring needs an easy mode and that it doesn't destroy people's experiences by adding an easy mode, right? Like, oh, the game being too difficult for players is alienating players, and people with disabilities are having a difficult time. And it's like, I then point to like other players who are playing other different types of games, who play those games even though they have disabilities. One of the biggest ones that comes off the top of my head is how there's a player who plays Street Fighter V, and I think his name is Broly Legs. The guy literally plays with his fucking mouth, right? Because he has a disability where he can't properly use his hands. I forget what it is specifically, but he essentially plays with his mouth, right? But he's like one of the best Chun-Li players fucking ever in Street Fighter V. A player has this disability, and yet they're one of the best Chun-Li players in Street Fighter V. Why can't these people just like not do the same thing with Elden Ring? And my problem when I talk to people about this is like, a lot of these people don't even have disabilities themselves. And I want to reiterate something that the Actman had said in his video, and it's that difficulty doesn't mean inaccessible. And I think that's just one of the most truest statements that I've ever heard. Just because something is difficult doesn't mean that it's inaccessible, right? Just because Elden Ring can be difficult for certain players doesn't mean that it's inaccessible, right? They have options that they can do in order to make the game easier. But if they're too fucking stubborn to not do it, or they're just not having a fun time, then they could just not play the game. Because not every video game is meant to be played by everyone. Not everyone is meant to play every single video game in existence. Example, I fucking hate the Civilization series. I think it's super boring and uninteresting to play. But there are plenty of people who love playing the Civilization series. I don't really like Fire Emblem Three Houses. I think it's a very boring game, and I think the characters are dumb. I think the gameplay is boring, and I don't like it. I just don't think the game is very good. But there are people who love Fire Emblem Three Houses, and that's fine. I just didn't like playing it, right? I bought the game, I went ahead and I tried it out, and, you know, it sucks that I spent $60 on the game that I didn't really enjoy that much, but it happens, right? That's the gamble that you have to take. Not every game is meant to be played by everyone, and that's why you should be open to trying something out. But if you don't like it, there are things that you can do in order to get your money back. Either by trading it in, right? If you bought it physically, just trade it in for a new game that you haven't tried yet. Get your money back by getting a refund, or just something else. There are ways to be able to get your money and your time back by if you bought the game physically. Digitally, that might be a little harder if you didn't buy it like on Steam where you can get a refund. But still, there are choices. There are choices that people can make, but they're too fucking stubborn to do anything about it because they feel like every player needs to play every single game in existence. That's just not how games are meant to be played. Elden Ring really is one of the greatest games I've ever really played, and it's an experience like none other. And it's even gotten one of my friends who I've known for a long time, who's never played any of the From Software games. He saw me playing a little bit of it. I showed it off to him. He played a little bit of it as well on his own separate save file, and he was really enjoying it despite him trying to fight the Tree Sentinel at the beginning of the game and not being able to beat him. And he got it like a couple days later, and he got further than I did. He got super obsessed with it. And that's just how it is. People, you know, play their first From Software game, they realize the experience that they have been missing out, and they go and enjoy what they get. And I think it's super cool that players are finally having that experience for the first time with a game like Elden Ring. It's going to be awkward for them to go back and play previous From Software games like Dark Souls 1 or even the original Demon Souls, not Demon Souls remake, but you know, they're getting their first From Software experience, and I think it's super cool that people are finally giving any of their games a chance just because this one has been doing so phenomenally fucking well. I want to list off a couple of tips and tricks for some players who might be struggling in the early hours of the game, in case some of them are watching. Early on in the game's tutorial, the game teaches you how to be able to wield something with two hands. This gives you +5 into your already existing strength stats. So if you have 25 strength and you wield something with both hands, that then technically means that you have 30 strength in total, which is good because some weapons require more strength in order to be able to wield them properly. If you don't already have the required points in order to be able to wield it with one hand, you can wield it with two and get the full benefits with it. Most people are going to tell you not to worry about a build in your first playthrough, but I would recommend watching a video talking about like the hard caps and the soft caps with Elden Ring and the various different stats that are available to give you a couple of ideas of what you might want to be able to do. And I would generally recommend you having an idea of what you might want to use. Like, are you akin to using different types of spells? Then, play a mage build and level up your mind stat and your intelligence, or your faith stat, because certain spells require higher faith or higher intelligence in order for you to be able to use them. I would just generally recommend trying to figure out what type of play style that you might want to check out. But don't worry, because you can respec with certain items in the game called larval tiers. So if you're trying out a specific build early on and you're not really having that much fun with it, you're not stuck to it. There are items that allow you to be able to respec into something else entirely. On the map, make sure that you go around everywhere, every little nook and cranny, because you might find a little secret, like a little secret cave that leads to a boss. Because even someone like me, who's invested almost 100 hours into this game, I haven't even fought every single boss in the game yet. There are certain bosses that I haven't even seen yet that other players that I've watched have seen like many hours before I have. So check around the map. If an area looks like there might be a boss, or there's a cave, there might be a boss in there, and I recommend that you go and check it out. Be sure to level up your vigor once you start getting towards the end game, like towards when you get to a point where you go to an area called the capital, because a lot of people have been ignoring leveling up vigor, but the intention was that you want to increase your vigor more so that way you can take more hits and not die immediately in one shot. Because like I said, a lot of players have been kind of neglecting the idea of leveling up their vigor. So keep in mind to do that, and don't ignore it, because you're gonna regret not leveling up your vigor until it's too late. I'm gonna say the same thing that every other person is going to say when they tell you when you're playing the game. In your first playthrough, don't kill any NPCs, because either they're a shopkeeper and you can go back to them to buy a specific item when you have enough runes in order to be able to purchase it, or a certain NPC is connected to a certain quest, and you don't want to really miss out on that quest, because most of the time you get a unique item that you wouldn't be able to get unless you did that person's quest. Make sure to keep talking to the NPCs as well, because a lot of them have dialogue that you need to listen to in order to progress further with a character's side quest. So keep talking to an NPC, and until they get to the point where they start repeating certain lines of dialogue, then that means you've exhausted all their dialogue and they have nothing left to say to you. So be on the lookout for that, because there are plenty of times where I've talked to an NPC and I've missed out on certain lines of dialogue that I didn't get before, and that ultimately led me to being lost in certain quests, to the point where I had to go and look for help online in order to be able to do certain things. Elden Ring naturally has many endings, but I would say in your first playthrough, don't worry too hard about it, unless you're a stickler for getting the best ending or the worst ending for some reason. Don't worry too hard about which ending you get. Save that for like a New Game Plus or a second playthrough on a new character. Don't worry too much about it, because there's really no point in doing that for your first playthrough of the game. And the last one I'm going to mention is actually being able to pause the game. And initially you're going to think that you're not going to be able to pause the game, but there is. So you're going to want to open up the pause menu, go into your equipment or your inventory or whatever you want, and then click on whatever button it is for you to ask for help, and then click on menu explanation. That's going to pause the game for you completely, and for certain people, I know it's going to definitely help them. I'm not really sure how many of those tips and tricks are really going to help, but I imagine some of them are going to help at least a few people, and I hope that they do. But that's not really what this video is all about. It was about everything else that I mentioned. I just thought that it would be nice to mention a couple of things that might help certain people at the very end of the video if you stayed long enough and you kept watching. But that's pretty much all I have to say about Elden Ring. This game is phenomenal. It's amazing. I haven't even beaten the game yet, and it's already considered to be one of my favorite games of all time and one of the greatest games ever created by a team of people who have been working rigorously hard on making a phenomenal game. And the story and the lore, it's the way that From Software tells their story and their lore is already beyond any other video game that I've played before. The Elden Ring just has so many interesting characters and so many lore tidbits that you can find, and even the smallest of things as you're traveling around in the world, that it makes wanting to know more about what's actually going on so much more rewarding. And talking about it with other players who are also interested in that is also very cool. And one last thing I wanted to mention as well, PvP is definitely a thing in this game, and if you want to try it out, you definitely can. But I'm gonna say it again, like I have for a couple of other points. For a first playthrough, I wouldn't necessarily worry that much about it, but there is a specific quest line that requires you to do a little bit of PvP, but you're not necessarily required to fight other players. You're just meant to use a specific item to do a specific thing that allows you to progress further into the quest line. But that's pretty much it. I don't have much else to say about Elden Ring. It's a great game. If you haven't tried a From Software game before, definitely go try out this one because it's definitely one of the easier of the games, but allows for so much content that you'll be playing the game for many hours, and you'll probably be experiencing things that you've never even experienced before in your first playthrough. So go try it out. Go play it. It's a fantastic game. Everyone should go play it. Difficulty does not mean inaccessible. Just go play it. Go try it out. So that's pretty much it. If you liked the video, be sure to like. And if you want to see more, be sure to subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. I'm out. Peace.